So with that, I'll ask the board, if you have any, we'll start with zoning ordinance amendment regarding marijuana and special use permit. Does the board have a recommendation? Or that's,
Just one minute.
it's the special use permit.
The
only thing I wanna mention is that we changed it to the American Legion.
Oh, yeah, that we changed, that we met at the American Legion, not at the downtown hall. Is there any discussion? Martina, did you wanna, bring up anything or ask any questions?
I don't have any questions, I have a statement about my position, I guess.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my name's Martina Rickards, and obviously I live in the village, and I was born and raised in Sanford. And I did a lot of research about what dispensaries look like in small towns in Michigan particularly. And I looked at both proponents for it and, both people that support and people that are against the dispensaries. And from what I can tell, what I've read, is that in small Michigan towns, there seems to be solid tax benefits and there's no real community disruption. I know some people tonight talked about their concerns about crime rates and what that could look like. And I didn't find a statistic about like small Michigan towns, but when you look at a national average of crime rates, there is no increased crime related to dispensaries coming into towns, and in some cases, actually, the crime rates decrease because there's an increase in police, what would you call that? Police presence. And each dispensary, like what was mentioned before, has to have a security guard. They also have to have a lot of lighting. They're highly regulated places. The other things that I read a lot about was that in small Michigan towns, they've been able to use that tax revenue that we talked about to help fix roads. They gave some away to local fire departments. I read about one small town was able to buy new playground equipment. And there was just developmental impacts that were seen across generations and different age groups in the town's positive things. The other thing that, I know Dolores had mentioned this, but just in 2021 alone, the state of Michigan distributed more than $10 million across municipalities for all of those things that I named. The other thing, and I know that this was already said, but if you regulate marijuana, you're getting a safer product in a safer way, right? And so, and I think if we're talking about being a community that is family focused, I know not everybody here is for marijuana, but if this is going to happen in our community, I would rather have it happen in a way that's regulated, as a safer product. The other thing that I read a lot about was that once a dispensary comes into a small community, again, these were Michigan communities, businesses around them would offer like specials to people that came into the town, right? So if you shared a receipt, like just went to the dispensary, you might get 10% off your meal or something at a local business. And those businesses said that they saw an increase in people that stopped at their restaurant or, whatever business that was. The last thing that I read about was in Lowell, Michigan. They just have 2 dispensaries downtown, and after the 2 dispensaries were put in, the city saw a roughly $6 million increase in taxable property value. And so I think about, when we think about rebuilding Sanford and what this is going to look like, each one of us here might have different thoughts on marijuana use or if we would ever use marijuana. But I think one thing that we can all maybe agree on is that we're here to try to rebuild this great village of Sanford. And I think that, my opinion, after doing a lot of research and looking at both people that are for it and against it, is I would like to support the change in the ordinance and adopting, looking at applicants to have one dispensary.
Thank you, Martina. Was that a motion to adopt?
I'm just saying my position.
Okay,
I don't know if other people have things to say.
So, I'm asking if there's a motion to adopt the zoning
I
ordinance.
will make a motion to adopt the amended zoning ordinance, so that it says the American Legion, but
Mhm.
I'll make that motion.
regarding,
Well,
go ahead, yeah.
so, oh, right. Well, I'll let Carl go ahead.
Madam President, I would like to, state that the planning commission, that we established for looking at the opportunities of the village, met earlier today, and they voted on the recommendation to the council that we would adopt this ordinance.
Okay,
That's the one that's here.
okay.
I will make the motion to,
So is that all that there became to be done?
So it's a motion to adopt the zoning ordinance as recommended by the planning commission,
and theirs is already amended.
which would include those amendments,
Okay,
right?
perfect, that's my motion.
With the associated
Motion to adopt.
The zoning ordinance,
amendment as recommended
by
Okay.
the
by the
plan,
planning commission. Which includes the associated map amendment.
Including associated map amendment.
map and verbiage amendment?
Map and verbiage.
Amendment. Okay. And that motion was made by Mark Thrush.
No, like, oh,
Yes, made by Mike, we just.
so do we have to sit down with Carl? No, we don't have to. sit down
Is there a
with Carl.
second?
Mark
Second.
and
And Carl is
Carl,
gonna
second.
second the
I was
motion.
just adding verbiage to it. Second, Mark.
No, you're.
Is this just an all in favor, or?
I would take a vote.
It would be a roll call, and if there's any further discussion on the motion, before your roll call.
Okay, any further?
Go ahead.
discussion? Any further discussion on the motion?
I don't
Okay,
have anything.
so, vote. Martina.
Yeah.
Lon. Yeah. Dolores.
I think I vote last, don't I, as the president, or doesn't it?
How he calls it.
Pardon? However he calls it?
Yeah. All right.
All right, yes. Yes.
Mark
Yes.
and Carl.
Yes.
So passes unanimously.
The motion is passed. So that is related to the zoning ordinance amendment to the marijuana and special use permit. So the second one is the Village of Sanford, Michigan regulation and taxation of marijuana ordinance. This is where it specifies one license, the 2-year review, and all the definitions related.
Right, so this is your police power ordinance. So this is your local regulatory scheme, what a marijuana establishment has to do and comply with, within the village. So with a bunch of definitions, the key provisions here are that you're, under section 3.1, you're permitting the operation of recreational marijuana retailers. You're permitting one of those to operate, so you have one local permit. All other permit numbers are set to 0, and then also set to, it's unlawful to engage in any of the other establishment types. So if a grower, let's say for example, wanted to come in and operate, you would have to come back to this ordinance both to move around section 3 and 1, and also to designate a number of permits to make available. So yes, it's possible to have more and different, but you would make some ordinance amendments to do that. And then it sets out several items as noted by one of the members of the public. It's a calendar renewal is contemplated. Some municipalities do it from the date the application is received or the permit's permitted. This is a June 1 to March 31 And yeah, I mean, if you get an application right away, you'd look at that, I think, at the time, whether, okay, maybe you set your meeting for June 2nd, or, yeah, June 2nd deliberately, so that you would issue it right within that operational period, but I think it's a detail to be aware of, but also something you can deal with at the time. There's no transfer of permits, so they're not transferable under this ordinance. Yeah, I'm happy to touch on anything you have questions on. Again, we do have a separate application process, so this is gonna be separate and distinct from your SUP. These applications, under the statute, are exempt from disclosure, they're confidential documents, so they're not subject to FOIA. Again, we do have the zoning administrator accepting the application, so if you wanna add in village clerk there, on page 6, section 5.1, that would be consistent. The way we've drafted the definition as well, the zoning administrator can designate someone to assist them, so we do also help communities review their applications. I just had a township supervisor drop off 2 3-inch binders for one renewal. So we're happy to help with that, and we have the definitions set to do that. I think it even permits the village president to step in if the zoning administrator is unavailable. So significant application requirements, as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions there. It is an annual renewal, so these are renewed every year. In addition to the state tax money that we've been talking about, there's a $5,000 application fee, which is paid to the village every year for both the initial permit and any renewals, and that's to defray your administrative costs of getting this all set up and then reviewing it every year when it comes in, and whatever other administrative or enforcement costs you have. There is a competitive review provision, but that's a requirement by statute that really shouldn't come into play here with only one application. But you never know, hopefully not. If it does, we'll be here to help you. And then some operational requirements. So again, we have the security provisions, which track the cameras, etc., that we have in the zoning ordinance. Again, the same 500-foot spacing from schools and churches. We have operating hours, so they'd only operate, well, they would only operate between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they shall not operate on a Sunday under the ordinance. There's some sign and use restrictions, waste disposal, yada yada. Penalties for violation set by statute, it's a civil infraction. And then this ordinance, different from your zoning ordinance, is effective 20 days following publication and posting by the village council. So since it's not a zoning ordinance, it's a bit of a different process. But again, the way it's contemplated, and actually I'll flag this specifically, one of the key pieces of the application that they have to submit is the special use permit. So that's on page 6. The special use permit showing final approval is required to apply for this local permit, which means you're gonna have to start on the zoning side and make sure that they're in an appropriate location within the village. So even though this is going to come into effect 20 days later, you're not gonna see an issue with that mechanics wise. It does mean you could see some SUP applications that would have an SUP fee, whatever that is. You probably already have a list of your costs to run those applications. So you wouldn't see your 5,000 at that point, right? You might get an SUP, that's just gonna be the SUP fee. Your $5,000 application fee comes later when they come in and apply for this, which requires zoning approval to be a part of that.
SUP is a special use permit, just for everybody to know. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. One question I think that came up a couple of times, Matt, was can we require the applicant to give a certain amount of money to the community each year?
So we do not recommend that.
Okay.
Some communities have clauses or provisions like that, but we really think that steps beyond the public purpose that a municipality, a governmental entity can require of a private person or private business.
Okay. Just wanted to answer that for everybody, because that was a question that came up a couple of times, so, okay. Any other questions or comments by the board then? Is there anybody who wants to make a motion to adopt?
I would make the motion that we adopt the Village of Sanford's ordinance authorization permitting adult use marijuana establishments. We don't have an ordinance number yet.
No.
We can figure out how that has to read.
Well,
Motion to adopt.
you wanna say the motion to adopt the exact language at the top
Yeah,
of
that's,
this?
yeah, the exact language as written. That's what I just read.
Okay.
Excuse me.
And, we'll just amend the location to be
Yeah.
consistent.
I can second it.
Okay, so, are we ready for the vote, or do we need
Can you
to?
second?
I
I
did.
can second it.
Oh.
Oh, you second? Okay.
Lon's gonna second, Carol made the motion, Lon seconded it.
Okay, so the vote, start at the other end. Carl,
Yes?
Mark,
Yes.
Dolores,
Yes.
Lon, yes, Martina. Motion passed.
Okay. Other new business? Then is this where we make a motion to close the meeting? Okay, do I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Carl? Anybody second it? Mark will second it. The meeting closed at 9:02? Okay. Thank you everyone for attending. What'd you say?
Where's your gavel?
I know, I don't even have my sign. It says my name.
Village Manager Dolores Porty, what do you think about today's vote?
Well, I think today's vote came after a lot of fact-finding, a lot of research, and after listening to the community in multiple community meetings. So I think, overall, that both the Planning Commission and the Village Board voted unanimously to put in one recreational marijuana facility with a very controlled set of rules, and is part of the regrowth of Sanford, but a very small part. I'd like to focus more on the appliance store, the yoga studio, the Big B Coffee, or at least the big picture, that there are a lot of businesses coming that will be good for the village.
What did you feel the overall consensus was tonight
From the audience or from?
from the audience?
I thought it was a split ticket from the audience tonight. That was my assessment, is there were many people that were for it and many people who had concerns about it. And so we need to be thoughtful about those concerns as we go forward to implement.
Anything else that you'd like to add?
Nope, I just appreciate that the public did participate and we heard from them. And I appreciate all the work that board members and the planning commission did to look into the question before we voted on it.